everyone, and welcome to this new edition of the Conversations of Excellence. Today, I have a very special guest, also a friend of mine, Jim HENDRIX. He is actually a certified brain health professional, and he has a great mission around empowering parents in giving their children every chance so that they can flourish throughout their lives. And it's all around the brain. And it's going to be an interesting conversation because he has a multi-dimensional career. He's also been a psychotherapist for 11 years. He's also a laser engineer, optical engineer, technical manager. Jim, you're so many things, and I'm excited for the next minute. Welcome to the Conversations of Excellence.
Thank you, Stella. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So as we are starting our conversation, Jim, is there anything that you would like us to know about you that I've not shared about yet?
Well, I guess part of it would be my journey through mental health myself. I struggled with depression from a young age, probably because I had a couple of traumatic brain injuries when I was very young, and then I had a bout with a psychotic episode in my, I guess, 50s, and just going through all of that myself has given me a deeper understanding for where people struggle and how to get through it. And while I've been studying all this brain stuff for 25 years or more, I did all of that stuff before I had this big problem. I've learned a whole lot more going through it.
So you have taken so many years actually studying the brain, and you've talked about the depression that you had at a certain period of your life. When you look back, what were you missing out on that made you dig deeper into the knowledge of the brain? Were there not enough information available? Why did you make yourself a kind of expert and specialist in understanding the brain? What was missing out?
It's a very good question. I think for me, there were some turning points in my life that I stumbled across a couple of books when I was in college that were interesting to me, and so I always kind of had an interest in the brain and in psychology, but I took the route of physics instead, and that career. But in the 90s, I started following Daniel Amen, whose work is probably the most known in this area. He's been the pioneer of integrative psychiatry, and as a result, been able to kind of make a lot of things much more accessible to people, both me and others. So that resonated with me.
Yeah. And when you look back at what you discovered around the brain, I know that when you actually help parents in understanding more about their children's brain so that they can have a better life, right? What is for you one of the biggest ahas that parents discover about their children's brain that they did not know about?
Wow, there's so many. I think the primary one is that there is so much that can be done to make it better and shape their child's future, not only for the now, but it affects their life throughout their lifetime. And right now, a child born today is supposedly going to have an average lifespan of 130 years. And if you don't take care of that brain, based on what's going on right now, they would likely be warehoused in some kind of nursing home for 60 or 70 years, and with some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's. But that can be not necessarily prevented, but it can be pushed off further and further away by doing the right things now.
Mm. And what do you mean by doing the right things now? Is there, because I mean, sometimes I wonder, and that's why it's such a deep topic. I know that we have a very short amount of time, but like, is there like is it big actions that parents have to take in order to avoid the damages the years after? Or how huge is the investment that parents need to do to avoid what is to come in the next years? And why
Right.
don't we know about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So it's a lot of little things for the most part.
Yeah.
One of the bigger ones is what sports you let your child play. And contact sports in particular have a tendency to give repeated blows to the head. That if, especially if they have they're positive for the ApoE4 gene, can lead to a much higher risk of dementia in the future. So that is one area that's a hard one, right? Because if your child wants to play football or soccer, depending on which country you're in, having a soccer ball is not an innocuous thing. Continuous or repeated blows to the head, even from a soccer ball, can cause brain injuries that over time add up and make turn into a problem.
Wow.
It seems,
Yeah.
it's just it's soccer. It's great, right? There's no contact to speak of. Compared to American football, where they celebrate by butting heads. I don't get that part, but
I'm very surprised about everything I'm hearing. I'm very surprised. And when I mean, I don't even know how to ask the question, to be honest. It's such a deep topic, and it's so deep. If you were to give us a story, like a precise case of maybe a family you've worked with, and maybe like you reversed a situation regarding their children, do you have any like specific story to kind of let us understand the importance of understanding how to optimize our brains?
Let's see. I worked with a young man who was in the place of trying any illegal drug substance he could find. When I started working with him, he was about 13, which is very sad. And he had already been through overdoses and was clearly in addiction mode. And we looked at an assessment that I do for people that's kind of like a brain scan. It actually comes from the same material and was generated through tens of thousands of brain scans. And it showed basically that he had ADD and it was overfocused, which sounds like they don't go together. But they do. It's two different parts of the brain that work in concert to make you both overfocused and have problems with concentration and executive function, making the right decision. And you get locked into the pattern of, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And so we did a course of supplements to help balance both dopamine, which is the problem with ADD in general, and serotonin, which is the problem with this overfocused part. And if you just do one, the other one goes down. They kind of balance. And
Mm.
so we gave him supplements to balance those two. And over time, supplements take longer than medication, but they have a tendency to have less side effects. And a lot of parents
Mm.
say no medication for my child. That's bad. It's not necessarily, but anyway, the balancing of those neurotransmitters basically helped this kid come out of it. He was no
Mm.
longer driven to try to, one, boost his brain by doing drugs, and
Mm.
two, not so focused on it, that he was able to kind of sail through. And as a result, um, came out the other side of that and really flourished beyond. I worked with him for a very extended period of time, which is not normal. I worked with him until he was 18, so 5 years.
Mhm.
But most of that was because I was one of the few adults in his life that he thought cared, and that by itself is very therapeutic.
Could you repeat what you said? He thought you
Yeah,
were.
he thought or knew that I was one of the few adults in his life who cared. People
Wow.
know their parents care most of the time, but if another adult they can know cares, it's hugely impactful. And usually that falls to coaches and teachers. But if a child kind of gets into uh, the rebel mode, even if they're not a big rebel, they kind
Mm.
of, or they're not, they get glossed over. That doesn't happen, and that's a huge part of a child's development.
Mm. That's quite interesting. The caring part that you brought forward makes me think about actually leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, can we say that understanding the human being's brain allows us to be better leaders?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you made that comment. Um, it's clear that we would benefit from having our leaders have an assessment, a brain assessment, and a even a spec scan,
Mm-hmm.
because we should know what's going on in their brain. They don't have to be perfect. Nobody really is, but to at least try to address those things that drive them to get offended and start a war, or um, yeah, or act like a dictator instead of a benevolent leader. That
Yeah.
kind of thing can actually be seen
Wow.
in this kind of scan, which is different than a CAT scan or an MRI. Those look at physical features. A SPECT scan looks at basically how well the brain is working. Is it working too hard,
Mm.
just right, or not enough in very specific areas?
Well, you got me very interested. I'm like, if I scan my brain, what am I going to find out? It's quite interesting. I didn't know we could do that. I mean, I'm discovering, and as we're building up this conversation together, I'm wondering, something caught my curiosity in what you said. You said something like, when we observe these scans, we can actually see, and correct me if I'm wrong, the style of leadership that the person has, or is it, did I
Yeah,
understand well?
there hasn't been a book written yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah.
The change your leadership, change your brain. But
Mm.
um, depending on which of the brain areas are working well or working
Yeah.
too hard or working not well enough, will change the style of
Mm.
leadership that a person
Mm.
has.
Mm.
The sort of the old style dictator leader is likely to have a very strong, what's called anterior cingulate gyrus, sorry for the big words, but
Okay,
it's
then,
you can
yeah,
call
go
it
ahead.
ACG, and it's a section
Okay.
deep inside the front of your brain.
Yeah.
And what happens is when it's working too hard, it gets people stuck on things. They can't shift from idea to idea.
Mm,
And so you're going to do it my way. I'm going to argue with you until you do.
yeah.
As an example.
That your example is actually quite interesting, and it gets me curious to understand. I don't know, I'm really asking the question very basically, and but that line you talked about,
Mhm.
basic question, is it something which builds up over time? Because you work with parents and their children, and here we're talking about adult leaders. Like it in is it something that you're born with and you're going to be like that, or does it change through time and you can take some corrective actions
Mhm.
to adopt another style of leadership? Like, for example, if we scan my brain now
Mhm.
and we see that line you talked about, which says Stella is a dictator, can I take some action? I told you, my questions are basic. Can I take some actions now as an adult
Mhm.
to that will impact that line, for example, to be a more caring leader, for example?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Through either supplements or medication, depending on which you
Mm,
are interested in.
yeah.
You can basically, that part of the brain is very receptive to serotonin. It has lots of serotonin receptors, and if you increase serotonin even more than if you were depressed, that part of the brain takes a lot. Then it calms it, and it
Mm,
allows the person to more easily shift from thought to thought, sort of be more, I'll say normal, although there are no normal people unless you live in normal Illinois. And which is a place in the States, and even they have the same problem. So, there really are no normal people. Um, but
thank you for your joke.
yeah. um, it is absolutely possible to calm that down and make a dramatic change in the person's way of being.
Mm,
There are people who get they have brain patterns that predispose them to do things like commit crimes,
mm,
um, and those things can actually be changed, um, and the person can be rehabilitated through changing their brain by supplements, medication, diet, exercise, and other lifestyle changes,
mm,
rather than just putting warehousing them for 10 years and see if they get better. I mean,
mhm.
nothing changes if nothing changes.
That's interesting. It's actually interesting to know that. So, if I understand well, there's always a way to change the current state
Mhm.
of our behavior, our leadership style. Whatever is there is not a status quo. We can always
Correct.
change, right?
Correct.
So, talking about change, we are in a time of lots of uncertainty. We're going through this global pandemic, and it's a tough and challenging time for many. And many of us had to change in some sort of way, right? Um, what do you think is actually happening is there a common thing which is happening in our brains today? And how to minimize the impact of the stress which is created around this state we're all in?
Right. There is a lot of stress, as you mentioned. Which has led to a lot of anxiety and depression. The
Mm,
numbers have gone from um, a few less than 10% to more than 25% for the rate of depression in as the pandemic started. So that was about July that those numbers they found had made that huge a jump. And I think that, well, the statistics are always too low when it comes to mental health issues because people won't admit they have a problem in general until it's just overwhelming. So I think I lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. My question was around understanding a little bit what is happening, what is the common thing which is happening in our brains today due to this global change and the global pandemic, and what can we do to minimize the anxiety around that?
Right. And so there are a lot of things. There are even what you eat makes a huge difference. Eating more clean diet, no minimize or get rid of sugar and starches like white potatoes and things like that helps a lot. Getting rid of, for at least in my country, the standard American diet is basically a bunch of poison. Hamburgers and French fries, a hamburger, French fries, and a Coke is a disaster meal. It's high fat, high saturated fat, and basically a bunch of sugar, and it has very little nutritional value. If you instead had even a piece of chicken and some vegetables and some kind of drink that is not full of sugar, or even a diet soda or something like that, those sweeteners tend to be particularly bad. Then you can change a lot of the stress in your life just by changing your diet. I go into a lot more as to that, things like that in my course, but that's one. Invoking a very minimal lifestyle change of adding some deep breathing and meditation to your life. And I say people can do as little as 3 to 5 minutes of each and reap a benefit. It doesn't have to be, you're sitting in a cave for months to meditate to get an effect for your brain. And I actually have images that show the changes in a person's brain through 12 minutes of meditation. It actually makes a physical difference. It increases the part of your brain that's responsible for making us human, and it calms the rest of the brain. So it's like ADD medication, if you will. And deep breathing, basically your brain runs on oxygen and blood flow, which is basically delivering oxygen. And your brain, the solid weight of your brain is like 60% fat. So you need healthy fats, things like avocados, and for some reason that's the only one that comes to mind. I like avocados.
I do too.
And so anything that increases blood flow to your brain is a good thing. Well, maybe, I guess I shouldn't go that far. Most things that increase blood flow to your brain are good. And because it increases oxygen, deep breathing increases oxygen to your brain. That's why if you're feeling overwhelmed, angry, whatever strong emotion you can think of, if you take a few deep diaphragmatic breaths, letting your belly expand and breathing in and out slowly, you'll find that within a few breaths, you calm down. And that's a big stress reliever. And it works like magic, but it seems too simple for people to do. As usually the people kind of blow it off and say, yeah, okay, that worked, that's fine. But If they're suffering from anxiety, it's like, no, I want pills. Give me pills. And anxiety medication is poison to your brain. It actually gives the same pattern in the brain as alcohol does, or other strong medication, or medications, drugs.
Yeah.
So, and let's see. So those are the basic things: food, and, and some exercise. You know, we've all been locked up in our houses, and exercise increases blood flow to the brain by about 15%, which is a lot. It's healthy for your whole body, and really what's good for your heart is good for your brain in general. So
Yeah.
some kind of exercise. There are specific kinds that are better than others. I don't recommend you go off and be a marathon runner, because that dehydrates your brain, and that's not a good thing.
Oh, there are so many things. I'm just like, I'm just listening. And I was wondering, with all the knowledge you gained about the brain throughout the years, and your experience also with having some challenge with, depression, you talked about it when we started out. If there was one thing, like in a few sentences, that completely made you think about maybe life differently, what would it be that you would share to kind of ignite that will to sit down and understand how this works?
It really boils down to this: if you want the best for your child, which pretty much everybody does, or yourself, learn to make some are minor, some are more major. The diet thing is usually a problem for people, but it's easy to do it with the right guides, and you can actually see through the spec scans that I use with examples for different things that it makes a difference. And people get brain envy, which is basically they want the best brain that they can have once they see that there's a difference. I've had people sit with me and look at the drug and alcohol brain examples that I have, and they go, "Oh, mine's probably worse. How do I fix it? Please help me."
And how
And
was your experience about that? Like,
oh,
what was, like, from your own life, the aha moment about, like, whoa, I have to know more about the brain?
it was probably about um, when I was going through my first divorce, and I was suicidal in my thinking, and I was recommended by 3 different doctors that I needed to do something now, and they prescribed medication. And in about a month later, my comment was, "Wow, life doesn't suck." It made such a dramatic difference in my outlook on life and my perspective. And
Wow.
I had already been interested in the brain, but just it was like night and day. And
What had you
I
discovered at that moment?
that I think one, that I couldn't do it on my own. And whether it's medication or it could have been supplements, you know, it wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference, just a matter of time. But that making changes could affect my brain and my ability to function. And then I wanted to know more. I wanted to dig deeper, and that's about the time that I really dug in to the information and learning much more seriously.
Wow. When I listen to you, it's like there's so many things that we carry on doing over and over again throughout our lives, without knowing that it actually impacts deeply our brain and our our lives, the quality of our lives. It's so interesting. I'm mindful of the time, and I know that this is such a deep topic, and thank you very much for helping us understand a little bit what it is about, you know. Before we end, I wanted to ask you, if people had to get more information about what you're doing, the work you're doing, what do you propose?
Well, they can always send me an email, and that is jim@jlhendrix.com. My course for Loving Your Child's Brain goes live in June on the 17th, and I would love to have people attend. It will change the trajectory of your child's life as well as your own if you apply what you learn, no question. And that, yeah, basically those things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity that you're actually giving us to understand more. Now, my last question, Jim, maybe last, let's see. But one of the questions that I love to ask, and we talked a lot about childhood, the brain, children, and the parents participating to, the understanding of their children's brain. Personally, now, Jim, if you had the Jim of 10 years old right next to you, what would you tell him?
I think that I would talk to him about diet and some of the things that seem to be out there, like meditation. At the time, for me, that was like, that's crazy stuff. And that those two things would have made an even bigger difference in my life if I had done them back then. And as well as telling myself, it's not normal for you to be thinking dark thoughts all the time. I never told anybody. And so I wasn't diagnosed with depression until I was, old. But it was there, and it was pretty serious. And so I would tell him that you need some help. It's not normal, and it's also, there's nothing wrong with needing help. If I needed glasses, I would wear glasses. And it's no different. Having an issue with your brain is no different than having an issue with your eyes. Your eyes are shaped funny if you need glasses, and so you need some augmentation.
Well, thank you for sharing that. it's really deep. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm it you know when you talked about your 10-year-old, you talked about meditation and how, it maybe at that time it was not something important. And it got me curious to understanding, did you have access to meditation resources when you say that, back then you didn't think it was important? Do you recall having access to such resources?
I think I knew it existed. I'm pretty sure I knew it existed, but no one that I knew did it. It was something that monks did on the TV show Kung Fu. It was not something that mainstream people did, and I had no clue why these monks were doing it.
Yeah.
It was just something that I saw on TV.
Yeah.
But the fact that I bring up meditation a lot because I was surprised that you could take a SPECT scan before and after and see the difference. I mean, it even makes a difference with something like PTSD. You can see before and after, and it made a difference. So
Yeah.
It's scientific fact. First, I guess I'm a scientist, and was back when I was 10 years old as well.
Yeah. It's very powerful when you talked about these before and after meditation pictures. Are the things that you also share about what I love about you is that you're not just talking about the meditation, you're talking about the scientific part. You're showing what is actually the result, the difference between the befores and the afters, so that people can see and get aware of what is actually happening inside here. So this is what I love about the way you're sharing around this. Thank you so much for just the generosity and creating such opportunities for people to understand. Because for me, for example, you just tell me meditation, I must admit, like, yeah, but do 10 minutes really do a difference, make a difference? But what you do is really showing the scientific facts. So thank you so much for what you're bringing forward and how you're sharing to the world. We're almost done, but I was like, what is maybe the question that I've not asked? Because this is such a challenging topic also for me, the scientific part. But if you had if there was something maybe that we didn't talk about and I didn't ask about, the floor is yours. Is there anything that we've missed on that you think is important to bring forward in our conversation today?
The thing that first comes to mind is that it's not just for kids. We all have a brain, and we all could use a tune-up. Doesn't matter if you are schizophrenic or have a 200 IQ. It will help. And so there's that piece of it, and it gets better. No matter what you've done to your brain, no matter what's happened, it can get better. Even if you've been a drug addict for decades, or you played professional football in America and you had 30,000 concussions, it can get better. And there are specific targeted ways for each type of brain issue that will help you get better.
Yeah. Beautiful message. Seems that there's a message of hope behind
Absolutely.
what you're sharing, despite the complexity of this topic.
Yeah, and it's not as complicated as it might sound at first. There's no need for anyone to have any understanding of the brain, science, physiology, any of that. It all comes along with the course or working with me, whichever. And I'm pretty good at breaking it down and presenting it so that anybody can understand.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point, like to motivate me, and get us going and understanding that finally it's not that complex, as you said, right?
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim, for being with us today and helping us to understand the link between our childhood, our children, the brain, the expansion of the brain, our leadership style. We talked about a lot of things today. So thanks a lot, Jim, for being part of our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella.
Okay, great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.